G'day everybody, welcome to Life, Love and the Pursuit of Real Estate. My name is Michael Biviano. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening and thanks for subscribing. So it's been really interesting over the last month to read the opinions in all the media, and I'm talking about TV, papers, internet, etc. and all the news feeds that come through. Everybody's got an opinion about the market correction, and there are a lot of experts that come into the marketplace and into the media stream and quote a percentage drop. How in the hell anyone is able to do that has got me beat. So not that I consider myself an expert, but I've been around for a little while and I've been doing this now for about 35, 36 years. And I still don't know how they can actually predict a 60% drop or a 40% drop or whatever. What we do know though is that in parts of Australia, the market has corrected between 5 and 10%, give or take. And that's based on the median house price and statistics on turnover, etc. So in other areas, we've now got a market prowess with certain people in the media, and excuse my hesitation there, I was just trying to formulate the right words, but that they give an opinion and then they start to sensationalise what they believe is to be a huge market correction, right? And in essence, when they talk like that, they're talking recessionary status. That's what they're talking about. So my opinion is this, and I thought what I'd do is, before I give my opinion fully, is I'd cover a couple of things. Now, the first thing is the banks. The banks are still going through the Royal Commission, and we do know that some of the banks have had some fairly hefty fines for, misappropriation of funds, financial mismanagement, misguiding people, etc. I get all that, and the reality of it is that the Royal Commission is here to stay. Our opposition at the moment are pontificating about how great they were because they pushed this thing along. I get all that, but the short reality is this, is that's going to probably affect the lending criteria and has affected the lending criteria of the banks, and the banks are now hedging their position. That's why we've just had a recent interest rate rise without any influence from the RBA. And the RBA, I think Tuesday this week, has just kept the rates the same. But the banks have increased theirs. So the banks are hedging their bets. So they're playing a safe game, which is really what we want them to play. Secondly with that, is that the lending criteria of the banks has got a lot tighter in the last 12 months. That's not just happened. That's been happening for maybe 12 months, maybe in excess of 12 months. And the video that I did with Travis Fulton, who was ex-NAB and Macquarie Bank, he stated that some time ago now. I think that was about 6 months ago. No, longer, John, that video.
Yeah, just over 6 months.
Yeah, and what happened is he stated that the lending criteria have changed, and that's really what's affecting the market directly, is that the amount of funds coming into the ball, pouring into the market, have dwindled a bit. The criteria for purchases got harder, your LVRs are lower, and that's making it harder for everybody. Makes it harder for the agent, makes it harder for the vendor, and also makes it harder for the buyer. Now, when we talk about a market correction, what we must understand that it is very segmented. So when they talk market correction or downturn, they're not talking globally Victoria, globally Australia, or globally another country. It is actually segmented, and that's how the market works now. The market is very different in its makeup now than what it was 10 years ago. And just to explain a couple of things to you, this is what I think. A, when they talk about between 140 and 160,000 people coming into Victoria every year, and that's the state that I live in, so that's the best example I can give, 2/3 of those people are migrants that are coming in, so new Australians. And there is a philosophy and a strategy from the government federally that these people go into the regional areas. So quite a few regional areas in Victoria and in WA and in Sydney, or New South Wales, right, and in Queensland are doing quite well because we've had a very strong regional rental growth, price rise in most of those states. Now, and that's very much due to the intake of migrants. Secondly with that, 1/3 of the people moving into Melbourne are already Australian residents. So what does that tell me? That tells me, A, at the moment, the policies of the government with huge infrastructure spending, and we're coming to an election on the 24th of November, but with huge infrastructure spending on rail and road transport, etc., is bringing people into Victoria to work. Great. So that's also having a very, very strong influence on the market. It brings cash flow into retail. It does a whole range of things which you will know. You as an agent, or you as a buyer, or you as a vendor need to know these things. And once you know this sort of basic information, you can actually start to strategize what you do with your money. Now, in Melbourne per se, the southeast has had a bit of a correction. What we have seen though, in the western areas, if there's been a correction, and I think it's very, very little, if any, we've actually seen a turnover increase. So the north and the west parts of Melbourne have gone from strength to strength. Why is that? Because the majority of the migration and new intake into Victoria are going to the western suburbs. And they're going to the western suburbs for educational reasons, financial reasons, because the cost of living is a bit cheaper, and also for job opportunities. And like in suburbs like Sunshine and further out that way in the west, there is every government department that's in Melbourne is actually in Sunshine. What does that do? That actually brings people into that suburb, as an example. Now, so taking that into account, I thought what I'd do is I'd spend a couple of minutes, and I'll try and keep these videos short so they're easy to watch, and just run through what I believe are the factors that affect the market. So first, population increase, which I've covered. The second thing is employment. As we know, employment is actually, the unemployment rate's actually dropped, so employment's actually gone up. What's happening in Victoria though, we are anticipating that we're going to get another rise in employment due to what I've just mentioned before about infrastructure. Debt levels. What we must understand is that 49% of Australian households are unencumbered with bank debt. So even if the household debt across the board is fairly high, and a lot of the media start pontificating about how high household debt is, and that the banks are leveraged to 65% of their loan ratio in housing loans. Well, in my opinion, they should be. And I think that's still safe. Secondly, demand supply. When demand meets supply, it's what they call the equilibrium. So what happens with that is that we always are going to have a position 90% of the time that demand never meets supply and supply never meets demand. And maybe 10% of the time, you'll find that it sort of equates and it works really, really well. Now, at the moment, in some parts of Australia and in some parts of the US, there's been some monumental growth in infrastructure spending in relation to building homes. That's great. And there's always going to be an oversupply at some point. What we need to understand is that's natural. So we need to understand that there's going to be times where there's going to be an ebb and flow with that. So I always liken real estate to a lolly shop. The more candy you've got in a lolly shop, the more kids will go in and look for it and buy it. And that's how I liken real estate. The more real estate that's available, in my opinion, means more buyers will come into the market. Because if you want to make money, it is my belief, invest in real estate. It's really simple. Now, continuation. Inflation. We've now got a position where we've got low inflation and the wages growth is above the inflation rate by a considerable bit. So therefore, I still think we're ahead of the game, which actually negates a little bit of the household debt problem. Interest rates. Interest rates, even though the banks have raised them, they're still low. The rates that we've got right now, quite frankly, whether it's variable or fixed, and some people have gone to the position of taking a hedge on both, I still think that the variable rate option at the moment is still good because it's cheap. And I still think the rates are buyable. So I think bank money, if you can get it and you're prepared to save and the banks are lowering the LVRs, which is making it harder, but you need to put more equity in every purchase you make right now, which is actually a good thing long term. Infrastructure spending from the government, I've already spoken about that. As a property developer, an ex-real estate agent, I would either advise or buy in areas, and my first criteria was where the government, federally and state-wise, was spending a lot of money on infrastructure in the areas. Right? Consumer confidence, well, that's all related to the things above. So what that means to me is consumer confidence should be based on knowledge. So we do these videos to try and give you a perspective. Not everybody will agree with me, I don't care. but I do a lot of research and I do invest. So I actually spend my money in the real estate game. So my confidence is generally based on where I spend my money is infrastructure spending, educational facilities, road and rail transport. Those sort of things make up, and the demographic mix make up where I spend my money for development. And credit lending policies of the banks. They are going to change, and there's nothing that you or I as the consumers can do to change that policy. So what we need to do is we need to be aware of what policies are changing before we go to borrow money. We need to find out what lenders are the lenders with the most lenient policies. And what you will find is that the private lending market right now, in Australia especially, is starting to come into its own run. So people are shying away from the banks, especially property development type borrowers. They're shying away from the banks and going to second and third and private tier lenders. Now that's been in the papers quite a bit, but that hasn't happened in the last 12 months. That's been happening for the last 3 or 4 years. That trend has been coming because guys in the game like me actually see that trend well before it actually hits the media. So when you are a buyer, when you are a vendor, or whether you're a real estate agent, you should be watching these videos to get the basic content of what's happening. Because as a consumer or a purchaser or vendor, you need to be aware of what the agents are knowing. And if you know that, you're going to be able to operate better within the marketplace. Because I do believe that real estate is the go for wealth acquisition. So true wealth acquisition, in my opinion, is made from capital gain. It's not made from rental yield or whatever you want to call it. It's made from capital gain. So you need to buy in high growth areas. Hopefully that's been of some help to you. God bless everyone. Thank you for watching. Stay great.